How many questions? The same thing. Put out content, put out a great product, test things, try it all.
If you were worth close to $200 million, which football team would you buy? For Gary Vee, it's the New York Jets, hands down. Known for his hustle, motivation, and ambition, Gary Vee has come from humble beginnings to become one of the most talked about entrepreneurs on social media and one of the most successful businessmen of the modern era. For Gary, it's not all about fast cars and fancy houses. He has a very different approach to spending compared to most money-loaded celebs. It's all about experiences, and it's all about putting his money to work. How much money did you make as a child? 20 a week in pocket money for cleaning the dishes and taking out the trash? Before Gary Vaynerchuk was even old enough to drive, he was already making thousands of dollars every weekend by selling baseball cards and comic books. It was clear from a very young age that Gary Vee, as he's since become known, who already successfully started a lemonade franchise at just 7 years of age, was destined for success. But who exactly is this guy? Before we dive into how he spends his cash, all $160 million of it and counting, let's figure out how he made so much money in the first place and, hey, perhaps get a little inspired ourselves. Long before the self-promotional wine entrepreneur became a social media star, Belarusian-born Gary was doing whatever he could to make money and save it after immigrating to the United States back in 1978. At age 14, he started working for his family's business, bagging ice for $2 an hour. But it was years later, when he revolutionized his father's liquor store in Springfield, New Jersey, that his star started to truly shine. Step one was to change the name. Shoppers Discount Liquors was boring, but Wine Library was catchy and new. At the time, he was fresh out of high school, and he knew that the internet was going to be a big deal. So he took his dad's brick-and-mortar wine business and created one of the first wine-focused e-commerce platforms in the world. With the internet at its fingertips, Gary grew the business from $3 million annual revenue to $60 million in just 5 years. During that time, he had also released an episodic video on his YouTube channel called Wine Library TV, producing an episode almost every day for 5 years. He'd share wine reviews and indirectly promote WineLibrary.com. It was another clever level of marketing for the business, one that caught the eye of the likes of Ellen DeGeneres and Conan O'Brien. This was just the first in a number of online marketing and social media plays, the first cog in his fine-tuned content-creating machine. Fast forward to today, and Gary has over 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube, over 1 million followers on Twitter, tens of millions of readers of his published books, and 12 million combined followers across his entire social media presence. In his 20s, Gary was making $35,000 to $55,000 a year. It doesn't sound like that much, but he avoided all expenses. He didn't take vacations. He didn't buy fancy clothes. He just saved and reinvested in himself. So, now that you've got a pretty rock-solid idea of Gary's business-oriented mindset and penny-pinching ways, let's see how he goes about spending all of that hard-earned cash. One of his first major purchases wasn't a fast car or a giant yacht. As we've come to realize, Gary isn't a fan of depreciating assets. It was shares. Shares in companies that he had researched and saw immense potential in, especially leading into the internet age. The first two investments Gary made were in Twitter and Facebook. And look where those companies are now. Gary didn't just buy his Facebook shares from some broker. He actually bought his shares from Mark Zuckerberg's parents. But what about Facebook stood out? In Gary's own words, he felt that chief executive Mark Zuckerberg simply, quote, had it. He believed in the person and the business model. He could see that the ads were working, so he invested $200,000 for a piece of the pie. On top of those, he was also an early investor in Tumblr, Uber, and Snapchat. Surely this man needs to have some fun though, right? It can't all be save, save, save. Of course he has fun. He splurges not on things that will clutter up a garage, but on experiences. He bought tickets to LeBron James's first game back playing for Cleveland when they faced the New York Knicks. That was always going to be a one-time, unforgettable event, and Gary wanted to foster memories of it. He took his brother AJ, who's a huge Knicks fan. What does this show? Well, for Gary, it's not about the tangible, but about being able to look back on a time, look back on an event, and appreciate it when he's much older. The bottom line?
I splurge on spending time with people that I care about.
A significant portion of Gary's wealth has been invested and reinvested into his very own company. The heart of his business portfolio is Veyner Media, a social media advertising agency that he co-founded with his brother AJ. Vayner Media has a growing list of locations, including New York, Los Angeles, London, and Chattanooga. and it boasts an impressive portfolio of clients. We're talking Fortune 500 companies like General Electric, Budweiser, Toyota, PepsiCo, Hulu, Revlon, Unilever, and more. While VaynerMedia might be Gary's largest company, the one which dealt the biggest blow to his bank account in order to get off the ground, it's not the only organization that he spearheads. A man of many hats, Gary is the mind behind Veynerchuk, a media and communications holding company, Gallery Media Group, Pure Wow, a woman's lifestyle brand, and 137 PM, a men's lifestyle brand. Plus, Gary is a partner in Vayner Sports, Green Street, and Resi. In 2014, Gary also combined with Matt Higgins from RSE Ventures to form a $25 million investment fund, Veyner RSE, which focuses on first-round financing and incubation. Now that's what you call an impressive resume. Had Gary not put his own money, the money he'd been stashing under the mattress since he was a kid, these companies would not have had anywhere near the same chance of success. We know that Gary's a Knicks fan and doesn't mind getting down to watch a game once in a while, but his sport of choice is actually football. Since he was a kid, Gary's been a mad fan of the New York Jets, and he has no problem spending his hard-earned cash on memorabilia, jerseys, and tickets to games. The love for the team all kicked off when he was young, after he and his family arrived from the former USSR.
What team do you like? And I was literally like that kid that didn't speak English. I was like, he says, you're a Jets fan. And so I went home and I was like, I'm a Jets fan.
Gary's parents couldn't afford to buy him a jersey like the other kids had. His family had to count every penny. So instead, Gary's mom knitted one for him. That jersey, with his favorite number 5 on the back, that knitted jersey lit a fire inside Gary ever since the 2nd or 3rd grade. And still, to this day, he wants to buy the New York Jets. According to Forbes, the Jets franchise is worth close to $1.23 billion. He's getting close. According to Gary, time is money. During the week, he avoids scrolling on his phone, he avoids binging TV shows, and so on. Based on that philosophy, Gary Vee has spent a substantial amount of hours, and therefore a substantial amount of money, writing 5 best-selling books and counting. His first book came in 2009, called Crush It! Why Now is the Time to Cash In on Your Passion. 2 years later, he published The Thank You Economy. And then in 2013 came Jab, 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 Right Hook, How to Tell Your Story in a Noisy Social World. Since then, he's published #AskGaryVee, as well as Crushing It, How Great Entrepreneurs Build Their Business and Influence, and how you can too. The cost of publishing a book varies greatly. However, it can easily reach $20,000, although Gary's fees were likely incorporated as commissions in the $1 million 10-book contract with his publisher, HarperCollins. Have you read any of his works? If you have, let us know what you thought. Were they as inspiring and insightful as the titles suggest? All of these books are thanks to a monumental deal secured following a flawless public speaking display at the Web 2.0 conference in New York City back in 2008. Since then, Gary has continued to speak in front of thousands of people, traveling from schools to businesses, and along the way, he has become one of the most sought-after public speakers in the country. The checks would fly in as a result of all these appearances. However, he does sometimes have to pay his own business expenses, including traveling across the country, accommodation, food, and some relaxed yet respectable outfits. While Gary isn't much of a splurger, he doesn't mind the idea of being a vacationer. In the entrepreneur's own words, "I want to travel the world with my wife and see amazing things far more than I want the new Xbox." Even though he's business-focused, he's still been spotted having a good time, hanging out at the beach, surfing on a flow rider, and has been pictured in a number of exotic locations, although he's often traveling for business. Not only does he pay for himself, his wife, and his 2 kids to gallivant around the world, but when he was younger, Gary was paying for his friends to go on trips when they couldn't afford it. For a man who needs to drive between hundreds of places every year for speaking events, it seems only fitting that he'd opt for a snazzy set of wheels from time to time. With a nearly $200 million net worth, Gary Vee can afford any car he wants. While he remains relatively secretive about his wheels, we did see him arriving in an Audi R8 to the Online Marketing Rockstars conference in Germany. However, living in New York, Gary usually opts for Ubers instead. He refuses to walk anywhere and takes an Uber to every meeting. That can easily add up to tens of thousands of dollars in accumulated rideshare costs. If he doesn't own that many cars, he must spend millions on houses, right? Wrong. Gary has firmly and continuously promoted the idea that homeownership is a terrible way to spend your money. He calls it a bad use of upfront capital because it ties you up, and he detests the idea simply because there are far better options out there. According to Gary, quote, "If you rent instead of buy, You could take that $20,000 to $200,000 down payment and put it to work in ads or in your business. You could use that capital to grow more aggressively." End quote. So, that being said, Gary is obviously a tenant, not an owner. He rents properties, and historically has rented those that were small and cheap in order to save more money. It's fair to say that this dude's savings account must be overflowing. What do you think of his work-focused approach? Too much work? Not enough play? Let us know. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, thank you so much for checking out The Richest. See you next time and have a great day.